Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Don't know, little quick geography lesson. Here's China, right? Here's India. We were just talking about India. Oh, there we go. China, India, Taiwan, South China Sea. We've talked a lot about over here on the right, Philippines. Right here in between is Myanmar. And it's important to note that it's a little confusing because you see Bangladesh here. India actually wraps around Bangladesh. So Myanmar shares a border with India and China, which means it's a very strategic place between those two countries. And Myanmar gained its independence the year after. It was also a British colony. It was called Burma at one point, which is why you'll hear a lot of people refer to it still as Burma. But it gained its independence just after India in 1948. The first prime minister was Aung San, so keep that name in mind. The military took over as a caretaker. I'm using finger quotes, caretaker in 1950s. They never really gave up power. So basically the military continued from the 1950s on, and then in the 1990s, the military said, hey, you know, we'll have a pathway to democracy. Go ahead, give it a try, see how it goes. And Aung San's daughter, which is Aung San Suu Kyi, became a political activist in the 1990s for what's called the National League of Democracy Party, the NLDP. They won elections. Hey, we're democracy. We have elections. We won the elections. The military's like, haha, just kidding. They refused to yield power. They put Suu Kyi under house arrest. And then Than Sui, a military dictator, takes over, and what's called the junta rises. So the junta is a collection of military leaders with one or a few in it. It's a small council of military leaders. And the junta ruled basically like a military dictatorship in 2011. 2011, the military says, hey, old is new, everything's fresh again. They put another roadmap to democracy down, right? And they were going to say in 2015, we'll have partial elections. And I say partial because half of the seats in parliament were still held by the military. The military still held a lot of statutory power. It was kind of like a test to see. They also created, this is important, a political party called the Union Solidarity and Development Party, the USDP. This is a front for the military. So the military has its own political party now, the USDP. And in the 2015 elections, Suu Kyi was released, Aung San Suu Kyi was released, and she won the presidency. The NLDP won seats in the parliament, but she's still very constrained by the military. And if people remember, she won the Nobel Peace Prize because she was sort of like a Nelson Mandela figure, under arrest for decades, finally released, now becomes the leader of the country, gonna set a new path. Unfortunately, fairly disappointing. It turns out that Aung San is sort of a politician's politician, and she's made no bones about this. She goes, I was a politician when I was arrested. I stayed a politician while I was in house arrest. When I was released, I became a politician. And as a politician, she cut deals with the military. That's what kept her in power. And some of these deals, you know, we've talked about in the past, the Rohingya ethnic cleansing and genocide, that happened under her watch. Now, it was perpetrated by a military commander, MYNAMAR Coup. I'm trying to get that, hope I get that name close. He was the military general that was in charge of operations, but Suu Kyi did not really protest it that strongly, even though she had some opportunities, and was largely seen as giving a free rein for the military to suppress and oppress the Rohingya, which created a huge refugee crisis. And some people have categorized, rightfully so, I think, as both ethnic cleansing and genocide. So that was a few years ago. Now the pathway to democracy has a larger general election in November 2020. And this is important because the Constitution at this point gives the president the unilateral ability to pick the commander-in-chief of the army. Remember, the military has been the dominant force in Myanmar for decades. So who runs this military is hugely important. And this would be, for the first time, put it under civilian control. The president gets to pick who leads the military. Well, I assume the military thought the USDP was going to win, but it didn't work out that way. So in the election, the NLDP won 396 out of 476 seats. So they won a clear majority, and the USDP only won 133. Well, guess what? Now Suu Kyi is the president. She gets to pick the commander-in-chief. Why does this matter? Because the current commander-in-chief, good old MYNAMAR Coup, who suppress the Rohingya, he's the commander-in-chief. By the Constitution, he is forced to retire when he hits age 65 in July of 2021. So if you're the military, you thought you were going to win these elections. I don't know why they thought that. They probably could have used some better pollsters, maybe get some 538 up in there, but they thought they were going to win. They didn't win. And now they're facing that someone else is going to pick their leader in July. And they begin saying, and stop me when this sounds familiar. The election's fraud. It was rigged. The whole thing's bogus. And so they make these huge claims, completely unsupported by any observers or any evidence, that the whole thing was rigged and flagged. And of course, everyone sees a coup is coming. And we talked about a coup. January 6th was not a coup. A coup is when the lawful military uses its authority and powers in an unlawful way to seize certain key institutions and literally take control. And that's what happened on February 1st. They did mass arrests of the political opposition. They used some trumped up charges. These charges are ridiculous. Suu Kyi herself was arrested. I'm not making this up. Unlicensed walkie-talkies for her security team. So they raided her house, and during the raid, they found walkie-talkies that they're claiming didn't have the right import stamp on them, or were for some outside external foreign country. They weren't licensed, and she got arrested for that. Another one of her deputies, again, I'm not making these charges up. It was illegal during COVID-19 to campaign politically. And this was the military's attempt to try and keep the opposition from winning the seats. Didn't work. So they charge one of the deputies with waving at a military convoy as it goes by and says, aha, you were politically campaigning. That was prohibited. You're now under arrest. So these arrests are completely bogus. And what's happened is the opposition, they may have thought that this would not have sparked opposition. They were very, very wrong. I often talk about the dictator's dilemma, which is an asymmetric way, and we'll talk about it with Russia here in a bit if we get to it. I may not be able to get to it given the time, but this is not a dictator's dilemma. What's going on right now in Myanmar is a conventional force opposition. It is a mass mobilization of hundreds of thousands of people matching force with force. They are not trying to use a small group of people to punch above their weight and provide more problems. They are literally applying the entire force of society against this military. So you've got a general strike that's been called. They've got mass mobilization. They're boycotting purchasing anything from the junta. Now remember, the junta isn't just, it's a military, but over time they've created these economic conglomerates which sell products and have other things just like businesses. So there's now a mass boycott to cut off the money. They've done vehicle breakdown campaigns. You can see pictures of it on the internet. You go out and there's like 15 vehicles. They all have their hoods up and they're like, my car broke down, or I'm out of gas, along with these other 20 cars right in this intersection. And of course, it's kind of like an impromptu barricade like they used in the revolutions of 1848 or 1830 or anything like that, barricades in the street. This is an impromptu barricade. It prevents transport. You got to deal with those vehicles. It creates a lot of, and they're having protests drawing hundreds of thousands of people. This is a mass movement. Now, the military didn't take this sitting down. They put in place martial law. They suspended all fundamental rights. They shut down the media. They blacked out the internet. So we're not getting a lot of news. And one reason I was watching is that literally today on the 17th was supposed to be the largest protest of the, and I'll put this back up on the map. The largest protest to date was supposed to happen in Yangon down here, and was supposed to be several 100,000 people. Before this protest happened, the military was deploying tanks, machine guns, all sorts of heavy weaponry. There is a real concern that a Tiananmen Square style crackdown, brutal military crackdown, is going to happen at any time. So a lot of us were hitting page refresh. It's now about 2 a.m. in the evening, so the day's passed. And I don't know the current circumstance. It's hard to find out. It doesn't appear there was a crackdown today, but we may find out later, or it may be coming. But there was this massive protest. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. This is none of these things, the Indian protest or this, none of these things are complete and done. They're all in progress. So let me go see if there's any questions real quick. Yeah, we knew it was coming for the, no one was surprised by this coup. Myanmar has been ruled by the military for so long that no one was surprised. What will be interesting to see is if the mass mobilization and conventional force-on-force approach to mass resistance is able to break the military power, or whether they're able to reassert military power, and what kind of violence is involved in it. Mike Morrison asked, any word on China infrastructure investments, Belt and Road? So what Mike is talking about here in Myanmar is that, again, let's take a look at the geography. So you actually have, here's Myanmar, here's China, right? China's right next door. They are very strategic partners. So there's been a ton of investment over the years in military. Because of sanctions and things like that, most of the military gear that the Myanmar military relies upon comes from China. They've also done a lot of economic investments, this Belt and Road. It's civil infrastructure investments. And there has been some conflict with China along these borders. In addition to the Rohingya, along these borders are Chinese separatists that have had conflict, and some of them are believed to be supported by the Chinese government. So China is kind of playing both sides of the coin here. They support the dictatorship in Myanmar with military and civic investment, but they also support some anti-government separatists along the border here, which causes problems. And what Mike's talking about, the Belt and Road, is what's called a debt trap. And a debt trap is, it's a very sophisticated diplomatic move, but it's, you can threaten your neighbors with weapons, and that's so 20th century. What China does is it does a lot of infrastructure by giving out loans, and then the debt that's needed to service those loans ends up being held by China. And so Myanmar becomes, in a way, financially dependent on China. It's a way of exerting soft power influence to maintain control. Because remember, China's strategic interest here, they have a huge strategic interest in the South China Sea, but they also have an interest here in what's going on in the Bay of Bengal and India. And right now, Japan, Australia, and India have signed a defense alliance against China. So you're talking about some strategic maneuvers that China wants to be the regional hegemon in. It's borders India, it borders these ones. It wants to project a sphere of influence around this entire region. It doesn't need to be global, but it wants to be a regional hegemon. And to do that, they don't need to just secure the South China Sea, but they want to make sure that they have checked India, and one way to do that is to maintain leverage over Myanmar. Now Myanmar has gone a little bit closer to India in recent years, and there's been some cooperation here along this border. So it's a complex situation. It's not just one or the other. But thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the Info Mullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the Info Mullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.